Bonjour, hi everybody. So this is What Drives Her Woman to Women. It's another episode of the interviews I'm doing for a few years now, interviewing women. Why? Well, because I'm convinced that all of us, all women, we can support each other, we can inspire, would be the better word for me. We can inspire each other, and all of us also need to be inspired and need to get ideas from others at some points in our life. So these interviews can touch professional points or personal points, if ever those are distinct, I'm not sure. And the women I'm interviewing are all from very different background, professional and socially, and I'm just seeing the person there. So today we are sharing, well, Annalie Howling is very kindly sharing a topic which is highly, I think, important and interesting, which is sexuality. Hi, Annalie.
Hi, Pia. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So, shall I just introduce a little bit about sexuality? Sexuality is both the sexual activity, so who do we want to have sex with, and the romantic relationship, who do we love? And they can go together or they can differ. So I have been checking. I am from the 20th century, okay? So it was much easier in the term that it was much more binary in a way in that time. And thank God we have reached more social or collective consciousness and societal consciousness, and we are much more aware of the spectrum of romantic relationship and sexualities. So I have been looking at those different, and I'm reading them to you because they are numerous, and I've learned actually from that. So there is alloromantic, allosexual, androsexual, aromantic, asexual, autoromantic, autosexual, bicurious, I like this one, bicurious, biromantic, bisexual, demiromantic, gay, gynosexual, heteroromantic, heterosexual, homoromantic, homosexual, lesbian, monosexual, multisexual, pansexual, panromantic, polysexual, I'm nearly finished, queer, scoliosexual, and spectral sexual, or spectra, sorry, sexual. Interesting.
Wow.
Yes, exactly. And a few of them I knew, and many of them I have and no clue about. But what is important is the person. So the very first question I would have for you, Annalie, would be, how do you think we define our sexuality?
I think, and this has probably been this answer to me very different today as it would have been even a couple of years ago for me. And this is we're speaking on the back of lockdown easing in the UK as well. We're kind of coming out of that. So I think there's been a lot of I've had a lot of reflection time for that for myself and discussing with friends. But sexuality is to me the kind of deep inner understanding, as you named at the beginning of our attraction, and whether that's the romantic or separating it from the physical, the sexual. And sometimes they are, as you say, one, and sometimes they're separate to that. And then also, how do we honor those roles? And they change if we're partnered, if we're single, if we're choosing time alone. And then the other thing that I think is the most important element, but is often missed when we use the word sexuality. Sexuality is, I'm just going to say, it sounds like quite a masculine term. It's quite a, energy term. But what we often don't discuss when we talk about sexuality is pleasure. And so how we receive pleasure and how we would like to receive pleasure and what are the ways in which we receive pleasure. So to me, sexuality really goes hand in hand with the pleasure that we enjoy and how we like to receive that.
Yes, I really agree with that. And when you say the how do we receive and how do we give as well the pleasure, would you agree that the very first step would be to know how we enjoy the pleasure? How do we have the pleasure? So knowing our body, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so easy to say that. And from my work with clients, from being a woman myself, from discussing with friends, it is one of the hardest things to maintain the seat of the receiver, even if receiving from self and understanding that. I had a client this week who's in her late 40s, and it's the first time that she started to touch herself. It's the first time she's felt able. Now, I know we're going to have a discussion in a little while, perhaps around cultural and religious impact and things like that. But that was the first time she had started to explore herself. So I think there have been some really good benefits from this time of slowing down and learning to be with ourselves. But absolutely, I mean, it's like it's an education, and I don't know that we have put as much emphasis on education around our sexuality for both us learning about it and then being able to educate potential partners and, you know, long-term, short-term, whatever it may be, and also how those change, how our needs change over time, our bodies change over time, our energy levels change over time, you know, all of this stuff changes, and it's okay, it ebbs and flows. And yeah, I feel that there hasn't been that, it's much easier to be in the role of doing, like busy, busy, busy. And so it's easier to be a giver sexually. It's much easier to be giving to someone sexually than it is to receive. And we can lose ourselves in that a lot more easily. But to, like, receiving a compliment is so hard. Receiving pleasure means you have to be, and being means you have to be vulnerable. And it is extremely vulnerable for a lot of people to be able to just be in that space and say, okay, and just sort of surrender to receiving. It's very, very hard. But yeah, I think that is absolutely the first stage, even to learn our own bodies and our own, you know, touch and the whole range of pleasure we may want, and then work with helping to educate, but also finding that balance with in what ways we may be blocking our pleasure, how are we not allowing ourselves to receive. It's really interesting.
Yes, and let's take that hypothesis that we have found it ourselves. And I like that you talk about that fluidity, because discovering our own body, we're going to talk about the culture and the religion in a short while, but a child naturally discovers their own body and their own sexual pleasure, their own genitals. So once, and then the pleasure and the discovery of specific pleasure and with who we can have the pleasure may evaluate with the time. So as you say, we have the education, and the education in our countries comes from the parents sometimes, or the school anyway, because it is part of the curriculum, the school curriculum. But we very often, so I don't know how it's done actually at the moment, but very often it's done in a very black and white terms. You know, there is man, and when we know, we are aware now that there is a whole spectrum that we were talking about before. So I like that idea of being in touch with who we are and what we feel, because that might be changing over time between the beliefs we have taken from the outside, from the dogmas, you know, the education, the school, the religion, and then meeting ourselves. Some people find that it can be very different. So I think it's very much what we feel is really, as you are saying, the very first step.
Yeah, I think it's completely different. When you were speaking then, what I was thinking about was sexual education in school and what I've maybe received. And I could probably do a pretty good drawing right now of a uterus and the fallopian tubes and the egg. And I could tell you about how all of that works and the cycle, you know, and all of these things.
All
and
the pipes, I call them all the pipes.
I could probably do a pretty decent job of that. Like, you know, maybe not labeling everything quite perfectly, but I could do that. But yet I'm happy to volunteer this, you know, until a few years, and I've had a child. So, you know, I'm nearly 40. There's been plenty of times I've had very, you know, I'm very healthy, but you go for gynecological exams and this and that and the other to, you know, stay on top of things. But I went on a course with a friend, and I'm sure we'll talk more about some of this in a while, but probably only 3 years ago, one of the requirements for going on this course, it was all women, and it was sort of around sexual empowerment in your body. One of the things you had to bring was a handheld mirror to look at yourself. And that was probably 3 years ago for me that I actually stopped and looked at myself fully from that way, not from a I'm having a kid or I've got to go and have a, a smear exam to check that, the pipes that I could draw and everything's working okay, to actually even look at myself and know how I looked, and then also look at a group of other women as well.
Mhm.
That's probably the first time I did that. And I was what, 36, 37. And so there is a huge disconnect with, it's
Yes.
important perhaps to know the science, but the science isn't my sexuality. It's very different. And that, I mean, that simple exercise blew my mind, looking at myself in that way, and even learning myself and seeing this part of myself that I hadn't before, and for no other reason. It's just not what you do. Or, well, I learned about that at school, but actually I learned an anatomical drawing at school. I didn't
Yeah.
learn about me.
It's very important because, and I know we have shared that together before, and I am deeply sorry, I can't remember the name of the artist, the ceramic
Yes.
that
Yeah.
the artist did of different vulvas. And so you see the different shapes. I can't remember if the color, I guess the color was there as well. The different shape, the different length, the different thickness, the different everything. And you see, I don't know, maybe 100 of them. Honestly, I have to double check, I'm not sure. But you could see all the differences. And this is exactly what you're saying, that the diversity there is a reality that nobody ever talked
No,
about.
because I mean, of course, we never, we talk about porn and how it isn't helpful, but and it isn't, because porn presents a, an image that's generally quite similar. So there's, removal of hair, for example, but I think it extends beyond that. I think that, having been on a number of these various courses now, and all designed to, empower women, one of the exercises is you will sit in a circle, and with about 15 to 20 other women, open legged, and you're able to see, and it's to, you can kind of benchmark yourself, but also you're able to just see what really there is. Like this, I know the ceramic artist you mean, I can't remember her name either, but to see the differences, and the differences, but we're similar. And yet with porn and things like that, everyone really is similar size, even, and similar shape. And from my experience on just simply one of those courses, very different sizes, very different shape, very different presentation with hair or with not, or really, really different. And that was, again, a huge sort of moment for me, and an education piece, which really shouldn't have been that shocking. And I'm quite body confident, my friends are. I've never been, I've walked around naked on girls trips and stuff for years, but you're looking front down as a woman, so you're
Yes.
looking across the front. You're not looking, up towards your pussy. And that was the first time. And it's very vulnerable, again, to, spread your legs and all of these things, and to look at the shape and lips and everything else. And that was something that I simply hadn't seen before in that way, that wasn't sanitized the way that porn does. And that was really
Yes.
important for me. It was very liberating.
Yes. Something more natural and more realistic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm glad you touched on this because on the porn thing, because for me it is part of the pressure of the pressure. I'm sure there are other words, but that the society is putting there for women and for men as well, actually.
Yeah.
We're talking women, but we can talk about the men as well. There's a lot of pressure. So you have the societal representation of how pussy should look like, or the genitals of a man as well, the penis and the testes. There is the religion, what we should do, what we should not do. And I'm thinking all the monotheisms, because actually I think the more traditional religions are much more open and relaxed about this. Actually, for sure, they are about genders.
Mm-hmm.
So, monotheisms have kind of, or at least what men did with it. I didn't know Jesus or Muhammad, or, but at least what men did with it, they just restricted things and controlled things very, very strictly. So what what is still the space of being when we are linked to those different dogmas or realities, like porn? I know I'm taking big things, so we can go in chunk. There is the religion, there is the porn thing, and the societal pressure, the social medias on how our body should look like.
Yeah, it's the easiest thing, I think, to emulate the look of pornography in sex. It takes very little skill if we're talking about heterosexual sex, just as an example in pornography. You know, in it goes, bang, 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 there we are, everyone's delighted. And that's just not how it works. And then if you've grown up looking at that as you say, so maybe not only do I not look like them, either male or female, and then I'm trying to reenact that, but I'm not having the same result. And these, you know, and why is this not working in this length of time? And
Yes.
the most common, and then the religious and cultural aspects around, is this dirty, is this, what were the messages you had as children around sex? You know, as you say, when I've got a very young daughter, and she came to me last week sort of noticing something about herself, and I'm obviously trying to celebrate that with her and going, that's amazing, that's incredible. But if you had a parent, if you said, I've noticed this about me, and a parent said, don't look at that, what are you doing? And possibly for their own, just their own discomfort, not because they're bad people, but that would immediately, that's a strong message that says it's dirty and not to touch yourself. I have this huge issue, massive issue with, my daughter's young, with the plastic hygiene strips that you find in swimwear and bikinis and underwear, and it's never
for very young children, for very young girls.
And when she was 6 months old, I have been picking single-use plastic as well, High the Oceans, out of bikini bottoms for a 6-month-old baby to now. And you get all of it. She's not, what's that saying to my daughter about herself? That she's too dirty to go into a 10-pound bikini, that she's dirty. And they're not in the little boys. You know, there's messaging that we don't even, and I talk to my friends about this, because you go and buy a top now or something that will have it in, and it's what message is that giving to us about how we are? And then you wonder why. And there are all these books and all this information about what girls and women are typing into search engines about themselves. Do I smell? What should I smell like? Am I dirty? And then we wonder why we can't receive pleasure, because I've got all these messages in my mind that I shouldn't be having a sexual appetite like I do, religious, cultural, potentially patriarchal. I shouldn't be enjoying my sexuality how I might want to, like Madonna or the whore, you know, like I shouldn't be instigating these kind of things. And then I've got all of these other messages about plastic strips, because I'm too disgusting to put myself in, like I say, a swimming costume, and my daughter is too. And then you pack all of that, and then you meet a partner, or you're going to be active, and then you wonder why you struggle to receive, or you've got this narrative going about how you might smell or taste, or, you know, all the rest of it. I mean, no wonder you're in your head and not in the experience. So I think that there are some good things that are happening. There are some fantastic, I think it's Dipsy is an audio pornography, mainly designed by women for women. So it's like more erotic audio books to allow us to channel our senses. But also, I mean, there are some fantastic books. Sex at Dawn is one of the most incredible books that I think is really useful and liberating, again, because it explains a lot about about society and how a lot of these things were developed, and also what we're turned on by. And it's a huge range, and we feel ashamed, I think, quite often about things that we become aroused by as well. So that's something else in our mind. And if you're in your head, you're not in your body. It's as simple as that.
Yes, I think you've nailed it perfectly. And what is linked with sexuality and women is dirty and shame.
Right.
That's what comes from religion, I believe, and that is what society has amplified. And we see that in the porn industry. And what the men has to carry is that they have to be, working and be hard and have an erection every time and have a big sex, and pleasure doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Pleasure. Let's talk about sensuality.
Yes, my favorite. Yeah.
Because sensuality is one way to meet oneself and the other, so sexuality can happen. Would you agree with that?
Completely. Sensuality, again, is something that cannot be rushed. So you cannot be sensual. You have, sensuality and all of the senses, the touch, the taste, the smell, the sounds, the environment, all of that is sensual. It doesn't even need to be what you would call a sexual act to have sensuality.
No need for penetration to have.
Not even
sexuality.
sensuality can be you using the most luxurious body cream on your body to honor it with a sensual touch because you value your own body. That's sensuality. Sensuality can be you choosing and savoring a really beautiful glass of wine that you've been looking forward to and pouring it in an exquisite glass and creating a moment of pleasure just for yourself. That's sensuality. And then if you imagine putting elements like that into a intimate interaction where all of the beautiful music that you find relaxing, inspiring, erotic, whatever it may be, lighting a certain candle, to say perhaps using some touch, massage, a cream, but all of these things are slow. And what that means is when you're slowing down, we're more into the being state, and that again can trigger some vulnerability. So to be sensual is to be slow, to be sensual is to be authentic, to be sensual is to be vulnerable. But that is the place that we are more able to give and truly receive pleasure. Again, on this course, there was an activity, this is all women, and some of the women on there are also sexual assault survivors, so they feel that they can't be with their own bodies. So this was really important to be there and witness everyone on a very different stage of their journey. And one of the activities was, and you were kind of clothed underneath, was to have a partner. The partner was blindfolded, so you're removing a sense. Music playing, and you had to spend 5 minutes removing the robe of your partner in a sensual way. Now, 5 minutes is a bloody long time.
Long time, yes.
So you have to start becoming quite creative. So all of a sudden you start realizing that the untying of the bow on that robe and the removal of the belt on it and the slipping it off someone's shoulder and pulling it down. I mean, you start really taking time over this because you want, this is part of the rules of the activity, but also as the person removing the robe and the person, doing it, it's suddenly you're both having this experience of sensuality. And I can tell you now, I mean, I had on probably some similar gym leggings and a top and probably a £5 robe from Primark, and my partner that was doing it when it was my turn and I was blindfolded, when she moved it off my neck, you could have plugged me in. It was one of the most sensual, erotic experiences of my life in a workshop room full of people. But it was the build and the touch and the sensation and the sensual aspect, and I felt very safe in that environment as well.
Yes, I think, yes, it's very, very interesting what you say, that all our senses we can turn the dial up. Yes. And really be with all our senses. And safety, I'm going to touch on that as well. It's the foundation. Because sexuality can also be about being playful, being silly, and it can also be about being submissive or vice versa. So there are many ways. There are many ways to live the sexuality, but, and that's what I wanted to touch, safety, being safe, safety and consent.
Yeah, safety, consent, and boundaries fundamentally. So on that course, for example, whenever you're going to do any activity, the first thing you would do would be to say, do you have any boundaries? Now, we're kind of educated clients in that. We were on this course together, so we both knew what it meant. But fundamentally what you're saying is there anything that you would not like? And is there anything that you are not comfortable with? And, you make an agreement before you even start. But that carries on to any other kind of sexual interaction, even with really long-standing, long-established relationships. There may have been a pattern we've fallen into. There may have been, we don't like to criticize our partner because we love them and we don't want to hurt their feelings. And it's really hard for us to say, I just don't really like it when you touch me like that. It's a bit too hard, or can we change this? And I'll quite often get emails if I do something similar talk from people afterwards saying, oh, I tried and I spoke to my partner about this and we've been together for years and it's, it's really shifting now, because we don't want to hurt people, but we do need to also assert our boundaries. And people want, if we're in that place, whether it's play, whether it's submission and domination, whether it's deep S&M, whether we're going to be consensually non-monogamous, whatever it is that we might be doing, we need to have that conversation about boundaries. And you have to be honest, because there's no point going, oh yeah, I love being submissive, it's great, if you really don't, and you're going to be unsafe and you're not going to enjoy any of it. you're not going to be able to receive pleasure, and your partner will see that too.
Mhm.
So being congruent and being honest about what it is, and obviously the cycle is therefore you must also know what it is, exploring yourself, trying different things with yourself, and being able to either educate a partner or learning things yourself is really important. But safety, if you haven't got that, you're unlikely to receive pleasure. If I said to you,
Yes.
you and I are quite similar, right? Let's go to a theme park. We're going to have a really fun day. And I say, oh, but it's the first time this ride is ever opened. And the seatbelts are a bit dodgy, but don't worry about it. Off we go. We're both
Exactly.
going to have a different ride. We are to, if I say, oh, it's fantastic, it's really good, they're really safe, I feel, really locked in, we're going to be having the best time of our life. It's the same thing in either solo or partnered sexual experiences. We need to feel that we're completely safe to be able to let go. And you can only really experience the fullest expression of pleasure, if we're talking about orgasm, you have to let go. No one's ever had an orgasm while doing the Waitrose shopping list. We have to let go. I mean, we've probably all tried, but we have to let go.
Yes, it's very important, yes, to set boundaries, to make sure what we want, what we do not want, that
Yeah.
safety thing. And that leads us to communication with our partner or partners. So it's good to know, it's the very first step to know what it is we want, what it is we do not want. But then we have to be connected with our partner or partners and to tell them, okay, this is the boundary, this is my limit, what are yours? And as you were saying, this I do not like, or this, please do it again, or I am showing you, I'm telling you,
Mm-hmm.
communicating with the other.
Completely. And I think there were two big things that came away from this particular course. And I've carried them on into conversations, whether it's in a work context or with friends, because I was so curious about this. And the two biggest takeaways from that entire course, this is women, so women, gay and straight women, but it was, I'm taking too long. That was the big thing. I feel like I take too long. So you check
Mm-hmm.
yourself out of whatever the experience is, because I'm taking too long. And the other one was not knowing how to ask for what I want. So the communication, I can't ask for what I want. And there was an activity which is using sensuality, where you would blindfold your partner, so you're not looking them in the eyes. That took the pressure off. And it was much easier to, it took some time to journal what it was that you want. I want you to slow down when you touch me here. I'd like you to let me take the lead.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to have some time to decompress after work, or whatever it might be. So you write down your needs, and then when the partner did have their senses removed, they're completely focused in the experience, but it was the not having the eye contact made it easier to share the vulnerability. But they were, without question, the two biggest outcomes. And when I've spoken to, say, to friends, or within workshops and things like that, they are always the two number one points that really resonate. Is I'm taking too long. I feel like I'm taking too long, because then I check out and then I'm unable to receive, because I'm in this cycle, this sort of vicious cycle, and I don't know how to ask for what I want.
That is very interesting, and I think it is most probably linked with the representation coming either from the porn industry or the societal norms.
Oh, completely. Yeah, absolutely. Because you know, you don't want to be frigid, but you don't want to be, seen as a slut,
Yes.
and you don't want to be this, and you don't want to be that, and you don't want to be, too much of this. And yeah, it's there's so, and is it normal for this, and is it normal for that, and am I normal for this? And
Yes, it's very interesting to see when you mention that word slut. It's something that I've heard in other interviews, not at all about sexuality, but the fact that the woman has to deal with all those representation. Can I be a woman plus potentially a partner, plus potentially a mother, plus potentially a slut if I want to be one? Or what what do those names mean, and can I be all of them when I want to be
yeah, yeah,
one of them? Is it possible to be, or do I have to be named a slut, or do I have to be named a mother or a woman? Where am I in all that? Well,
yeah.
we can be whatever we want,
Where
ladies.
is that fluidity? I think I saw something on International Women's Day earlier this year, and it really resonated around that, like the different roles and the struggle between the roles. And it said, just remember that for everyone, your first home was a woman. And I just thought, wow, I mean, everyone, your first home was a woman. So however that happened, like, we are all here
Yes. Yes.
because of a woman. And I think this is where the society and the inner belief perhaps isn't where society says that we can be. I mean, society saying it's, come on everyone, it's 2021, you can do what you want, but then there's still this, like, oh, certainly with friends and myself, my age
Mhm.
group, and because we still feel that we have to be perceived in certain ways, as you say, and successful in each of these roles. And for me to be doing a bake sale at the school gates, can I also be talking about going on a course and looking at other women's pussy, and can I then also be doing my job really successfully? The answer is absolutely yes, of course I can, because I'm still me. I'm made up of many parts, but fundamentally I'm still who I am. But I think there is this pressure, and I'm not, when it's applied from a number of different places, to conform to different roles, and that's where it gets really confusing.
That's the word. Do we conform? Do we want to conform? And what do we do with that? And where is what space, what mind space, and what body space do we offer ourselves
Mm,
on
yeah.
that? And sexuality is we've been talking only on the side of chosen sexuality, but there is as well imposed sexuality. Women, we're talking about women, but obviously I'm not denying that it happens for men as well. When there is a rape, whether it's in a domestic abuse or in a war situation, that we all have, and the women who've been through that as well have their own past, and that does influence as well whether you've been in a very violent and traumatic situation, or if you've luckily not had. But I have to say, working with women, it's not necessarily that traumatic as a rape, but 99% of women probably have been through some kind of uneasy situation, or sexually maybe not attacked, but maybe touched, or maybe words making them feel dirty. So with all those different things happening in the life previous to a sexual activity, that does influence our own sexuality. Would you
Mm,
not say?
absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. I mean, so I've done quite a lot of work sort of over and post lockdown for women that have been sexually assaulted. And I would say every single person that I had to work with, the person that assaulted them was either their partner or someone they knew really well. And
Typical.
and it wasn't recent. I think the lockdown had given them some time to reflect on the impact it had in their life. And it impacts not just in your sexuality, it impacts in your confidence in so many areas and how you show up. And there is so much, obviously so much pain around that, but it's the belief that you're left with, that you were either, you deserved it, or you were worthless, or then you're unworthy of love and a healthy sexuality. What is healthy sexuality, especially depending on maybe when that happened to you, how old were you? If you can't trust someone that was your partner, how can you possibly trust somebody else to treat you very well? It's really a very difficult area. And again, it's about somehow, without sort of minimizing what happened to that individual, but helping them find a path back to their own wholeness, and knowing that they are still whole, more than whole, and celebrating their own, and uncovering and discovering their own sexuality. And it is possible, but it obviously takes quite a lot of time to get there. But it's the shame, and it's, again, I'm going to talk about women, but absolutely, of course, this happens to men as well. The shame that the women that I've been working with recently that are left with, that somehow they asked for it in some way, or by saying no, or, well, I kissed him first in a bar and then he came back, and then I said he could sleep on the couch, but then he came into my bed and I kept saying no, 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 no. But so somehow maybe we'd had some drinks, so is that my fault? And
The
I
famous gray zone.
completely, all the ones that I've had lately to work with have all been the gray zone. But it's, as I say, look, put your best friend in that bed, put your
Yes.
sister in that bed. Is it her fault? Did she ask for it? And the answer is always no. I mean, and the cure for shame is self-compassion, but we struggle to find self-compassion for ourselves in some of these situations when we feel, and it might be a grey zone, and this is again where this conditioning comes back in, that somehow because you're wearing a low cut top or you had a drink more than two, you were asking for it perhaps in some way. And the other thing I think that we haven't really spent enough time on is that that's also kind of undermining men in that they have no control whatsoever. Oh, well,
Yes, absolutely.
he couldn't stop. He couldn't stop. He was aroused, so he couldn't stop. Well, I'm fairly sure he's been aroused at other points in his life, like at a family lunch, and didn't manage to, carry through with something there. So this is not me doing a downer on men, but there is again sometimes a the sort of what's left behind in some of these incidences is that he was unable to stop himself, and then that adds to the shame that these people have been carrying, which is just not the case.
Yes.
That's what I think
Yes.
is an important distinction to make. And I know again this happens a lot to men and it's less spoken about because it's even more shameful for them, so I really don't want to belittle their experience at all, but the grey areas I think are very damaging because they seem to be the ones that carry with us the longest.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a lot of guilt, a lot of uncertainties. Am I right to feel what I feel? Can I express it? And actually, I would like to say something. When I say the famous gray zone, I do not believe in a gray zone. It is called gray zone because the society is still unsure about it. We are, thank God, moving on that. But no, ladies, I don't think there is any gray zone. Actually, a no is a no, and an unsureness is a no.
Yeah, absolutely.
Point.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah, put your little sister in that bed, put your best friend in that bed. Did she ask for it? And the answer is always no.
exactly. And I like when you're saying, well, you know what, men can control themselves, because I think above all other thing, the respect for the person, either man and woman, is the utmost importance. And the respect goes, for me at least, with trusting that one individual is able to control themselves and assume what they're doing.
Absolutely, especially if you want to, go into something like S&M, or you're going to do something where you're completely reliant on safety being the key thing. So if you're going to be experimenting with something whereby your safety really is dependent on the other person, you need to know that they've got you in that sense, and that's then that you can heighten pleasure because you know that you're always safe within that situation. It's going to be very damaging if not. And then, I mean, you touched on sort of, so that we talked about sexual assault, but then domestic abuse. And I think there's something in Emily Nagoski's book, Come As You Are, which is the most important book I think that anyone can read on sexuality ever. I recommend that everyone reads it, men and women.
I think, Annalie, that would be great if you tell us, and I will write, actually, ladies, I
Yeah,
will write all the details and all the references of the book
it's the
Annalie
most
is mentioned.
incredible book because victims of domestic assault often report having extraordinary sex lives, like incredible sex. And that becomes really confusing because you've just got this perpetrator that is hurting me. And yet, how is it that I can have this extraordinary pleasure-based relationship with this person? It's because the spontaneous desire, that initial butterflies that you get when you first meet somebody, is cranked up so high in a dangerous relationship because it has to like even itself out. This is where our evolution gets a bit off, because we're meant to be attached, because by being attached we're safer in numbers. If a big tiger's going to come and attack us, it's better for us to stay with a partner. So our attachment system has skewed the balance there because the relationship is unsafe. They've turned up the dial of spontaneous desire. So the sex is incredible. Why is any of my friends best sex of your life? Probably with someone that wasn't yours, or a danger, someone at work, someone that wasn't mine, someone that, something like that, not encouraging it, but just if I ask people, the answer is generally, and I have asked a lot of people this question, it's generally something like that. Oh, we were at work and no one knew, it was secret. Because the relationship is unstable and unsafe, our super smart attachment system has gone, well, I need to level this out, so I'll whack up the spontaneous desire. Best sex of your life, probably one of the worst relationships, and that's why. But people that are victims of domestic abuse, they often have this incredible sex life, and then it's deeply confusing that you can be experiencing pleasure in that way with that person, and maybe it's the best you've ever had, but yet the relationship is terrible. You can be experiencing sexual assault and orgasm People don't talk about that.
Absolutely.
Because your system has gone, oh my God, we're in big trouble here. We might die. We need to be as safe as possible. Let's turn that right up. And also we have, we have this inbuilt system. Our body can take over at that point to try and keep us alive and keep us safe. There is no shame in that. But if that had happened to you, male or female, if you had an orgasm during an assault, you would be very confused about whether, well, did I ask for it? Did I enjoy it? I had an orgasm, so I must have done. So there's more needs to be spoken about in that area as well. But this spontaneous desire thing, the Disney, oh, well, if I say to girlfriend, we always talk about it. Oh, I've been on a date. Oh, how was it? He was lovely. He was safe. He was kind. He was handsome. He asked me all the right questions. So are you going to see him again? No, because when I kissed him, there wasn't like this amazing spark like there was with so-and-so. And we go, oh, never mind. What a shame. Whereas actually that's probably a really, really healthy system, but a relationship for you, but your system isn't firing in the same way as it might when it's an unhealthy one. And that's the responsive desire, which is more long-term relationships, which is where sometimes we're like, oh, it's not as easy as it used to be turned on. And, why is it lockdown that I'm not swinging off the chandelier with my partner that I've been with forever? Because responsive desire it's a bit like the hob. You just need to let it warm up a bit longer, but it's there. Yeah. Spontaneous desire is there straight away, but possibly with spontaneous desire, it's there in the early stages because the relationship is unsecure, the honeymoon phase, or it's perhaps not the most secure relationship. And more people need to know that.
Exactly. I think it's very important to point that out, because when we know that, then we learn to know ourselves and the way we react and what it means in the environment we are in and with the person or the persons we are with. And once we have it, me with the other or the others, and me with this environment, then we understand the way we function, and then we can more clearly choose what we want and what we do not want, back to the boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we also, I think, if we talk sexuality, we also can talk about asexuality, because some people are asexual. And we can also say that in some times in our life, for diverse reasons, that can be illness or the moment we are in our life or the environment we are in, sometimes we just don't feel like having sex at all. And I'm thinking illness, actually, I'm thinking mental health, or at least when we feel anxious or depressed. And COVID can be one of those situations.
Oh, definitely. I mean, everything takes our energy. So any function that we're about to go into is going to take our energy. And most of us don't feel turned on. We're in the middle of like the school run or doing a variety of chores, or we've got an urgent deadline. Most of us are not able to accessing that at that time. But if you say, I'm busy at work, you go, oh yeah, fair enough, that's okay. But we aren't creating enough normality around the fact that absolutely, if you're not mentally resilient at the moment, if you're not feeling yourself, you're unlikely to be able to or want to channel that part of your body. You might not be in touch. I've certainly been through some periods in my life when at the very early stages, when I knew that my marriage probably wasn't going to work out, that it was a difficult time for me, and a lot of my energy, focus, attention, anxiety was being focused towards that. I'm not feeling the most erotic, sensual, turned on version of myself in that time. And that's okay, because if I was doing that, I would have been checking out of what I'm dealing with. And that's we all find coping strategies. But so for people that are maybe having a period of asexuality, people that are asexual, it's normal and it's okay that right now, quite probably, your focus and attention and your energy is being used on something else. Your system's probably pulling you that way. And when you've tackled or worked through or got over the area that you're focusing on now, the likelihood is, if you create the space for it, it does have to be intentional. That's the only thing. It is like a muscle. Exactly. So creating space for sensuality for yourself. If you don't feel sexual right now, create pockets of sensual. Like I said, the nice body cream, taking time over a beautiful meal, lighting an expensive candle even and savoring it. There are still ways to access your pleasure.
Exactly. Keep in touch with your pleasure.
To always keep in touch with your pleasure. If you don't feel sexual and perhaps you're partnered, create a beautiful meal that you both gain pleasure from, have some touch, there are ways of maintaining the pleasure connection, even if you feel that right at the moment you're not able to maintain the sexual pleasure connection. But you can always, as long as you're accessing your own pleasure, even a song that you love and things like that, then you're still able to access that part of yourself. And when you feel ready and you can create some space to look into your sexuality again, and it may have shifted, it may have moved on since a break in time, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That could have opened up new avenues or discoveries or curiosities, and just be with that without judgment.
That's the point, without judgment. So there is no right way to be, there is no wrong way to be. Just stay in touch with the pleasure. And well, being French, I would agree with the nice meal and the glass of wine. And I think as well, the touch is very essential. The touch is also what makes us mammals, animals, and we need it. It's not a luxury, it's one need we have, to touch and be touched, that makes us be alive and exist. And that's the correlation of the emotions and the being. So touching is very important. Again, feel safe when you touch, make sure that the person feels safe, and when you are being touched, make sure that you feel safe. That's the main thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we talked on lockdown about what did people miss, and it was
Yes.
hugging your loved ones. It was touch. People didn't miss chit chat and this and the other. It was touch. So yeah,
Exactly.
touch, if you can connect yourself to touch and to be connected to your partner, if you're in partners in the system, you're halfway there.
Exactly, very important. Now I'm coming to my red ribbon questions. How would you say being a woman is very specific in sexualities? Is it something that is easier or less easier? How do we relate to sexuality as being a woman? And I'm not saying heterosexual or homosexual or any of the terms that I've listed before. Is there anything specific in being a woman related to sexuality or not, in your view?
So this answer is kind of based a bit on myself. So I'm turn 40 in a couple of months. So this is like my age range maybe as well, and sort of my own experience in life and my life stage, I think, is quite in this answer. But I think when you're younger and female, it can feel quite disempowering, because I certainly didn't feel like I was in control of like comments or relationships or environment even, and I didn't maybe feel as assertive. And then I'm a mother now, I'm single, I'm able to explore whatever I like, but also there is an inherent confidence, I think, that comes with age and being female. And like I mentioned before, that quote from that quote from International Women's Day, your first home was a woman. I think there comes a point in a female journey when whatever your version of that is, however it resonates, it clicks in. And then when you realize that me and my turn on, as I call it, is me and my power, not necessarily me being sexual, but me accessing my pleasure, that, whether it's in my work and I'm taking pleasure for what I'm doing there, or pleasure in small beautiful moments with anything, interactions with friends, anything. When I learn to access that more, that's when I'm in my power. So yes. I think that for me, I think it's fantastic being a woman sexually and in sensuality. But for me, there's definitely been a shift as I've learned more, been more empowered, understood more, released any shame and conditioning, as much as, it's every day's working on it and shifting to this other place. So I'd say it's a journey, but when you get to this place, it's amazing.
And it gets better, I think. And I would say, ask yourself if your very first relationship, and I'm talking to myself, to yourself, to anyone listening to us now, was your very first sexual interaction was a good one or not? And 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, the answer would be no, or I can't remember what it was. There is a kind of a neutral thing, or absence, or not owning that moment, because we're not sure, because we've had sort of injunction, I have to be like this, I have to do this, or just, you just don't know your body, you don't know yourself that well for most of women. So it does get much better and better with age, and the authorization we give ourselves to see our body, to see ourselves. And it is true in life in general, I would say, and it is very much true in sexuality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had my daughter and stuff, but I'm much more confident in my body now at 39 than I was at 29 and 19. So there definitely are huge shifts that come through, and all of that builds the
Yes.
sexual element as well.
Yes. And the other red ribbon question is, what is your definition of sisterhood? I think it's something that is important to you. So, what is your definition of sisterhood, and how do you integrate that with a more global term of humanity? That's a
Mm,
big question.
beautiful question. Just think how beautiful it is. I think sisterhood, and I think this is probably actually linked to the sexuality again, and maybe it's a point in a female journey. There can be times when women are not for one another. Perhaps you've had someone being mean at school, and then you grow up, and jealousy and insecurity and different behaviors and falling out with friends, and nothing cuts like losing a female friendship. You can deal with the boys, but when we have a female friendship, it really hurts. And to me, that's the sisterhood, is that you can, biologically or not, my best friends are my family. They really are. My female friendships are so important to me. And also I think they take a lot that your relationships don't have to. You don't, your partner, as we know, should not be everything that the sisterhood really is. It's your work, it's your ideas, it's your support system, it's how we nurture, it's how we learn about one another. And a romantic relationship is fantastic, obviously, but the sisterhood just is this wealth of wisdom and beauty and knowledge and pleasure, and it's the space that we can hold for one another to really be our best selves. And if you find a group that champions and cheerleads you and doesn't judge, but will also hold you to account lovingly, that's the sisterhood for me. And it's just, yeah, life is great with a great sisterhood. And so the role in humanity, I hope, is just offering that softness. I was listening to this beautiful audiobook by Shaman Jurek, and he was saying how we've been too sort of pre the lockdowns and COVID, we've been too masculine, which is just as a whole, goal, which is very positive masculine, like we achieve our goals, we get things done, we're action, we're forward facing, but we've been lacking we need to balance the femininity. And that's the role that the sisterhood plays in humanity. It's the holding of the space, it's the empathy, it's the just more of that energy. I'm not saying male and female, it's the masculine and feminine energy, but that's the role I think the sisterhood brings to humanity, is allowing and creating that space for us to really show up as our full selves.
I love that you finish with that word full self, because the word that came in my mind when I was listening was the wholeness.
Mm.
That's what I heard when you were describing what femininity, what sisterhood is for you. I was hearing the wholeness. I'm taking you as a whole. I see you as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I will show up everything, probably the bits that I would rather polish up and present in a different way to other people. But yeah, that's this role of the sisterhood, and I hope I play that role for those in my sisterhood, is that I will hold you, your whole self, however you need me to, with no judgment, and we'll
Yes.
elevate one another that way.
Safety, wholeness, and I see you, respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Annalie, that was just brilliant. And I would like you to tell us, to tell all those women who are, and hopefully men who are listening to you now, what is your work? I know you are a coach, performance coach. So tell us a little bit about your work, and how could people reach you. And I will, again, as I do with everyone, I will put underneath the video all the details for you to reach Annalie if you want to.
Thank you. So the easiest place probably for people to see little bits more of me and interact is on Instagram, and that's at Annalie Howling, which will be linked. My business website is Incasa Consulting, and Pia will add that. But yeah, I'm a performance coach and I work in trauma therapy, but really utilizing that with performance as well. So I work with elite athletes ranging from motorsport, Premiership football, England rugby. I'm looking at a shirt on the wall over there. I've done some work with some previous players. And then I also do a lot of work with military, elite military, ex-members of the Special Forces, and military transition. I sit on the board of a charity for veterans of the armed forces to help them transition to civilian life. And more of my sort of day-to-day work is within the corporate market. So working usually with the C-suite on one-to-one coaching, team coaching, and doing big workshops and webinars, particularly around kind of liberating ourselves and the changes and impacts that COVID may have had, and encouraging the wholeness for us to move forwards.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Annalie. So, ladies and men, if you're there as well, please feel free to contact Annalie because she can help you. And thank you, Annalie, for talking so freely, but I knew you would. That's why I wanted you to do that, to speak so freely and honestly about sexuality, because this is much needed.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much, and goodbye, everybody. So I